Pan-Africanism talks of uniting Africa both in the region and in the diaspora. I'm confused for sure to say what is an African in the diaspora.
Well, I mean, we have to acknowledge. Well, I saw a very interesting article today. King Charles, the British monarch, he's at the Commonwealth Heads of State movement, where I think there are about 50 Commonwealth countries, all the countries that the British crown had conquered and made them swear allegiance to in the Commonwealth. So now they're having this meeting. And one of the big discussions that they're having is the subject of reparations. Should the crimes against humanity perpetrated by the British be subject to a process of compensating the descendants of those who were wronged by colonialism and slavery? Okay. And we can't deny that there was definitely an enduring impact that colonialism and slavery has. So my brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, of course they are African. Also, when you're talking about colonialism, and we're talking about the Commonwealth, who has set the terms for the relationship with the superpowers? It's always been Britain that has set the terms. They have said, no, we're not discussing this issue of reparations. Okay. And we're saying, no, we're closing the discussion about this. There's a scandal called Windrush in the UK where thousands of people from the Caribbean were given passage to the UK because they needed labor, they needed skills, teachers, etc.
Okay, but
let me just finish this. Okay. They were then denied their citizenship. Even their children were denied citizenship. And as recently as I think 5-7 years ago, all of these people who'd never known life in the Caribbean were deported to a land that they came from, that they'd never seen before in their lives. Okay. These people are African.
But what makes them Africans if they're not on the African continent? Because I think we can also go to the black people in America. They identify as African Americans to some degree. I don't know if that's what they call themselves. But if I remember well, the first slaves arrived in America in the 15th century. And from there, they've been in America. And they've lived there. That's the place that they've only known through their life. How then do they identify themselves as Africans? How far do we go back to history to say this is an African and this is not an African? Because if we say Pan-Africanism is pushing for Africans, but we are also trying to include some people who were by slavery, went into slavery, into another continent, maybe 6,000 years, not 6,000, maybe 600 years ago. And we try to include them as the Africans in diaspora. How do we balance that?
It comes down to, for me, sovereignty and agency. Their agency was taken away from them. They were removed from Africa, and they were put elsewhere as though they were objects, as though they were implements, as though they were tools to further the industry of capitalists and colonialists. Okay. And these, Africans were not considered people. They were considered subhuman. A debt is owed to everybody who was removed from Africa. Okay. And whether they eschew that, whether they accept that, we're talking about Africans now. Okay. That's up to the individual to decide. But it's quite clear that historically, I mean, how do you define an African American as anyone other than somebody who was taken from Africa, stolen from Africa, and brought to America? Yeah, they are African American.